another edition of Curious Rebel TV. My name is Advita Patel and I'm the CEO and founder of CommsRebel. We help organisations build inclusive cultures through effective communications, and I'm based in the wonderful sunny today city of Manchester. Every week we interview different guests who will share their thoughts around inclusive cultures and their specialist topic. And today I am chuffed to bits to welcome one of my associates, Sarah Browning, who is a kindness ambassador and a communication professional. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, thank you for having me. Excuse me, frog in my throat already. It's exciting to be here.
I'm really, honestly, we had such a good conversation before we went live, and I can't wait for us to dig in a little bit more about your topic of specialism and also what this means for the folks who are listening as well. So before we get started, do you want to tell everyone who you are, what you do, where you're based, how sunny it is where you are, the weather?
Absolutely. Well, we do have a little bit. So I'm based near Reading. So we do have a little bit of sunshine. It's not enough to get rid of the frost out there. So yeah, a little bit nippy, but yeah, all good. So yeah, so I'm Sarah. I am a kindness cheerleader and communicator. And I have for, over 20 years been working in internal comms and more recently in communication strategy development. And I work with my clients to help them get more from their communications activities by taking that strategic look and really linking what they're doing comms-wise to their bigger picture and their vision and mission and what have you. And then for the last 3 years, I've also been running the Time for Kindness programme, which is all about redressing the balance of the narrative we have about our world, because I believe, and it turns out lots of other people also believe, there is lots of kindness in the world. We just don't talk about it enough yet. And so the Time for Kindness programme is about redressing that balance we have about our world and ourselves within it. And we do that by sharing stories, examples of real life kindness. And we've just gone up, we were sharing one story every weekday, and we've now just gone up to sharing at least one every day of the week, every day of the year, because there are just so many out there, so many examples. And I also run workshops to teach people tips and techniques to notice kindness in the world around them, because there is lots out there, and we can keep up with the news and the stuff that is going on that we need to understand, particularly as communicators, as kind of context for our work, but at the same time, as I say, notice the kindness so that the balance is better, and we're not going under, I suppose, really, from all the negativity. There is also a positive side that we can use and choose to use to sort of keep ourselves balanced.
Yeah, you're right. It's a Dalai Lama wanted that. He said, be kind whenever possible. It's always possible. And it's a really interesting subject, because before we went live, I was telling you about some of my friends and people in my community who were sharing with me about how guilty they feel about sharing some of the good stuff that's going on in their lives, and the kindness that they have shown other people around and what's happened to that in response to that kindness. And they were saying that, I feel really quite uncomfortable sharing that, because there's so many people going through so much right now, and I don't really want to negate what they're going through. And I found that really interesting, and completely empathize with that. And I can see where that comes from, because we are surrounded, as you said, Sarah, if right now we are continuously bombarded with so much tragedy around us, and just not only in terms of what's going on in terms of Israel and Gaza, what's going on in Sudan, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. There's a lot going on, and it can be really overwhelming. And I always say to folks that we do need to put on our oxygen mask first, because if we're not well and we're not looking after ourselves, we can't help or do anything else. What you said, you do lots of you do workshops and you help organizations understand what kindness means, and I can imagine it'll be really interesting to hear for folks who are listening or watching back on replay, in terms of, I'm assuming that most people think that they generally are quite kind, right? I can't imagine folks saying I'm not kind, and if they do that, then imagine that's really weird. But generally, most people think that they're kind. So when you go into an organization and talk about kindness and the benefits that kindness can bring to a workplace, what's the response that you're normally met with leaders that you generally support?
Well, I think it's interesting, and it's particularly interesting in the case of leaders, actually, because I think, yes, people are not going to say, oh, I am unkind. But at the same time, kindness is not something that has been traditionally valued, particularly, at leadership level. We again, talk about narratives and changing narratives. I think we have a narrative, or we have traditionally had a narrative where to be a leader, you have to be strong, you have to, crack down and not let people get away with stuff and all that kind of nonsense. And actually, that's just not true. The leaders, I think kindness, some of where that comes from is because kindness has been seen as a weakness, really. Something.
Well, it is, isn't it? Because if you think about some of the attributes of leadership when they talk about what it is to be a good leader, kindness doesn't appear in any form anywhere. You talk about credibility, you talk about decision maker, you talk about confidence, you talk about gravitas and resilience and all of that kind of stuff. But in all the leadership books I have read, and I'm sure you're exactly the same, kindness doesn't appear. Like, be kind. Anywhere.
Not in that language. And I think that's the difference. I think we need to get more comfortable with using the language of kindness. Because actually, some of the things that you just mentioned there, there is a kindness to them. There is a kindness in building teams. There is a kindness in building relationships. There is a kindness in recognizing within your team that different people have different strengths, different interests. They're going through things. All of that kind of stuff is there. So, this idea that kindness is weak, I completely, I don't have time for that. I don't agree with it at all. I think it's powerful. And I think it's powerful because it connects us as human beings. And if, as a leader, you're not connecting your team and your organization, then what are you doing? And you do get a lot back, quite honestly. If there is kindness, then you get lots back in terms of people are more committed to you, to your organization, to what they're doing, to their colleagues, and it's what I have found with the workshops that I run, the feedback I often get is that people say, it's been lovely just to have this time to sit with colleagues and talk about something positive and, get to know each other better. And then after that, when they've had that positivity, that positive experience, we share stories of the kindness that we have seen in our workplaces. And that doesn't have to be huge. It can be something, it could be someone doing the washing up for a colleague. It could be, a colleague's got a deadline, you check in to see how they're doing. There's all sorts of things that can count as kindness. And once you start to really see them and recognize them, and it gives you that sort of boost, of course, you're going to want to take that forward in everything you do. And what leader doesn't want that kind of, that positivity and therefore the amazing things we can achieve together? Who doesn't want that associated to their business?
Yeah, so, exactly. And what I want to talk about, which is just while you were chatting there, I thought about some of I do a lot of coaching around confidence. So it's not a secret that I'm a confidence coach, and I support a lot of folks to build confidence in themselves in terms of, so they can be who they need to be, right, going forward. And one of the questions, one of the curious questions that comes up when we're having coaching sessions is the difference between kindness and niceness. And I often get asked I'm too nice, right? I'm a walkover, and I don't want to be a walkover. And sometimes the association with confidence and kindness and niceness is mixed up.
Yes.
Could you describe, in your opinion, what you think the difference is between being nice and being kind? Because there is a difference.
Absolutely, and I think you're right. I think that's where some of the idea that kindness is weak comes from, because it's kind of, it's nice, it's kind of fluffy bunnies, it's but it isn't. Kindness is you can have difficult conversations and do it in a kind way. It's about connection and empathy, really. It's about understanding what is going on, for that person, and understanding what they're. So, for example, if you're having to make people redundant, you can do that in a kind way. The end result is still the same, but for me, I think it's about leaving out any cruelty. So, another example, I guess, is, if you holding people accountable. I mean, that's one of the examples that comes up quite a lot in workshops. There is a kindness in holding people within your team accountable, because to their job and to their objectives. Because if you don't do that, you're not being very kind to them, actually, if you're setting them up to fail, to all intents and purposes. And you're not being kind to the people around them either, because very often, and I'm sure many of us have been there, you're in a team, someone's not delivering, and everyone else is trying to kind of pick up the slack or fill the gaps or whatever. And actually, that's not very kind to everyone else. So, it's not necessarily easy to be kind as a leader, but it is possible, and it takes thought and intention and looking at, okay, so what have we got going on here, and how can I balance the needs and requirements of different team members, and that kind of just being nice to everybody. There's a place for niceness, don't get me wrong, nice to be nice and all that, but it doesn't, it's more of a superficial thing, I think.
I agree.
It's really, where it's kind of, again, that power comes from just how fundamental it is to us as human beings.
Well, you're right, because kindness is what you described there about, when you're communicating internally or communicating to your colleagues about difficult decisions that organizations have had to make. And I've, like you, working in the world of comms, a lot of organizations have had to make some difficult decisions over the last few years, particularly. You can still deliver that with kindness and with authority, right? It's not like you can't do that, and not being able to see what's going on around you and treating people as human beings at times is where I believe leadership can go wrong. And I think even from the tactics, what you just shared, like tactics of not sending out a comms at 5 o'clock on a Friday, telling people that there's going to be some tough conversations on a Monday, because you don't want people to be like struggling over the weekend, wondering what it is, like what's going on, or sending out a vague note about, I need to see you in my office tomorrow morning sharp, like without giving an explanation about why. It's these kind of, and this is very tactical, but these tactics make a big difference in just changing it. And I said to you before we went live again, that if we all just amped up our kindness by 2%, imagine the ripple effect that could happen.
Yeah. And so much of this, I think, what you were just saying there kind of illustrates that so much of this is about listening as well, and thinking about things from someone else's point of view. And in recent years, I have changed the way that I do some of my comms consultancy, whereas with the audience part of that, I used to say, put yourself in their shoes. I've started to change that, because actually it isn't about how would you feel if you were them. It's how do they feel? What's their experience? What's going on for them? And it really is that kind of genuine. I know it can be bandied about quite a lot, can't it? That listening is an important skill, and it can, if you're not careful, it can become a bit of a tick box exercise. But that kind of genuine listening to what is being said verbally, to what isn't being said, to what is being displayed through body language, and all that kind of stuff, it can make a real difference to them, because it may well be that you yourself would quite like to have the email the night before, so that you knew that what was happening and you could be prepared. There might be some of your team members, actually, for whom that is also a good thing, but it's not you that's getting the email. It's about your team and those emails. And like you say, some of it can be quite tactical, but then it has that bigger ripple effect. And the tactics, why wouldn't you apply them?
Yeah, exactly. Is that what you just said is getting to know the people that you work with, right? So I always I have this thing which I have taken from somebody, and I'll get all and we'll make sure we put it in the comments as well. But it's the user guide of me, which is trying to understand who your team are and what they need from you. And that is a step in terms of demonstrating that you do care and you do want to be heard. And that word that you said, genuinely care about the people that you're working with and what they need from you. So, because to your point, some people may want an email the night before to prepare, and that's fair. And I think that's good. It's the detail that you put behind that email that will help them. And some people may not need that. And but it's finding out what they want from you, right? And it's building trust. And I do talk a lot about building trust. It's a key part of building an inclusive culture, and kindness falls into that, right? So if we want to build a culture of inclusivity and build a culture of trust, then kindness is that big contributor. And organizations have ingrained kindness in their values and in their mission and vision, not necessarily using the word, Sarah, as you quite clearly said. But when employees do feel valued and they do feel cared for and they do feel heard, that's that psychological safety, right? That everyone talks about. And Amy Edmondson wrote the book on it, The Fearless Organization. And there's loads of evidence and studies that demonstrate that when we experience or perform an act of kindness, that oxytocin hormone that we have released in our body is linked to feelings of trust, respect, and empathy, right? So even though we're kind of having this informal chat today, it's actually peppered in science. I know that's a word of today, peppered, but it is. There's lots of science.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there is. And there's an increasing body of academic research around kindness specifically. And in fact, the oxytocin, not only does it have that, as you said, kind of psychological trust and kind of emotional benefit, it actually has a physical benefit as well. So there's a researcher, I think he's Dr. David Hamilton. He did a study that showed that doing kindness, receiving kindness releases oxytocin. I'm not a scientist, so you'll have to look up the details, and we can get the link. But for the specifics, but essentially there's a chemical chain reaction from oxytocin that leads to blood vessels dilating, which means that your blood pressure is lowered. So and there are other physical positive benefits as well. And then also the other sort of, because we talk about why does kindness matter in some of my workshops, and so we talk about those kind of individual benefits, but then kind of coming back to an organization, there's also been research that shows things like you get more job applicants for, particularly I think the age range that they did the research was something like job applicants in their 20s, but I'm sure it extrapolates beyond that as well. But you get a higher percentage of job applicants. They're more likely to apply for something if it lists kindness as a value for that company. And so I think we are starting to see businesses, organizations talking in that kindness language a little bit more. I think we run the risk of it becoming something that is spoken about and it's a value on the wall. But if that's not people's experience within the company, then we're right back, as you said, that's when trust is broken, isn't it? And you don't feel psychologically safe because your leaders will talk about, oh yes, we're very kind here, and yet actually they're not. So I think the whole kind of, I don't know, is it circle to be squared or square to be squared? I'm not really quite sure, but there is definitely that thing, isn't there, with any value, particularly something like kindness, where it has to be more than a word. It has to be lived experience, employee experience. And at a time when businesses are struggling for recruitment and retention, then it's a really key area, I think, to look at that employee experience and how it's expressed. And for us as communicators, what do we do to contribute to that, to highlight that, to be the voice of our employees as well? That's the other thing, isn't it? That's part of our role, is to reflect that back to leaders. If there's that, you have that situation where they're talking about kindness, but down here it doesn't feel kind, but they don't know because there's a sort of a set in the middle. And our role sometimes as internal comms people in particular is to be that voice, isn't it? And to say, look, this is the word on the street, so to speak.
Well, we hear it, don't we? And I've said this for so many years, that we have a very privileged position as communication professionals, and especially internal comms, where we have the umbrella view of the organisation. So we hear from our leaders and we hear from our workforce in terms of what's being said, and often it's the stuff that's not being said is the clue and the red flag. And I have a list of kind of, when I go into organizations to do observation around inclusivity, so sometimes I'll go, suddenly some clients of mine will say, can you come in and just observe, meeting etiquette, or just general, like look at the kind of inclusiveness of our policies and stuff like that. And I will always kind of look at it with the kindness arm as well, Sarah. Like, is this organization being fair, and is it being transparent, and does it communicate what it needs to communicate in a fair and kind way? But often it's something that people just forget about when they're working at pace, and they're working at with a lot of pressure, and those clipped tones, or that slight attitude, or just not really seeing the signals in their team that they don't now feel safe speaking up or contributing or being innovative. Sickness for me is a big signal. If absence is high around stress, generally signifies that there's something going on, right? So if you've got a load of your colleagues going off stress on a frequent basis, yes, it's a high pressure environment, and yes, there's lots going on and there's lots of pressure, but what do they need from you to help them understand the support that they can receive? And that sometimes is missing. And I've witnessed it, and you would have, right? I've witnessed 99% of the people that I work with are not malicious at all, like leaders and people I have conversations with. They're not malicious people. They're not nasty people. They generally care. They generally want people to thrive. And they genuinely want people to be valued.
Yeah.
They know the research and the studies are showing that when people feel that they belong and feel included, then they are going to do good work for you, and they're going to be loyal, and they're going to spread the advocacy work and all that stuff. But it's because we are in this environment of there's just so much happening and there's so much going on and so much stress. It does trigger the behaviors that we don't like about ourselves at times. And I've been there. I know I have, and I hold my hand up that there has been situations where I could have been kinder. And because of the pressures on me and the stress, I haven't been, and I have felt it afterwards, and I have gone back to apologize. And that's key. I think a lot of people will think, oh well, it's gone, moved on now, but I will still, if I've done my reflection bit and I realize I haven't been who I wanted to be, even if it's 6 months later, I will go back and go, I have to kind of speak to you about this because it's important that you feel heard, and I didn't hear you that day, and I went forward and did this. And that has taken a lot of reflection on me, and a lot of learning, and also a lot of uncomfortableness, because it's hard to do that, to go back and
absolutely. I mean, good for you, because as you say, it often gets missed for a whole variety of reasons, and I think some of that actually is a sort of lack of kindness to yourself as well, because obviously being kind to yourself is a thing, and it's one of my kind of top tips that you know, if you want to kind of notice kindness in the world, you want to be kind, you know, start with yourself, because you know, we all make mistakes, don't we? You know, we are all under pressure, and you know, we're not all perfect. I mean, who would want to be? It doesn't sound very appealing to me, but I know it does to some people. But you know, we don't all get it right all the time, but for all sorts of reasons. And so, you know, I think, as you say, that sort of taking a bit of time maybe to reflect, to kind of sit with that discomfort, which again is not something we're particularly used to, or you know, that is necessarily something that we want to spend a lot of time doing. And I don't suggest you spend too long kind of going downwards on that spiral.
You want to spiral.
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of recognizing it, you know, is part of that kindness, isn't it? And you know, forgive yourself.
Well, I would say talk to yourself as you talk to your best friend or your loved one, right? That's a big part of. We can be very tough on ourselves. So we've spoken about people not seeing where they may be unkind, you know, unintentionally at times, but also on that side, what you just said is so important, that we're very hard on ourselves at times, you know, and we can really beat ourselves up about something. And this it kind of links in with courage and confidence stuff as well. Is that I will always say to my coaches that if you don't talk to yourself with kindness and respect, then other people won't. You know, so we need to appreciate ourselves. And I said the other day to a friend of mine when we were talking, she's been in my life for a very long time, and she said that the change in you over the last 5 years is significant in your confidence, in how you approach things, and how you look at things as well. You know, in terms of a hope, because Priya, who's a co-founder of Leader Like Me, our second business, but also the co-author of the book I've recently written, we always say we have to choose hope over fear every time. Because that's all we have, right? And I don't want to live in a state of fear all my life. Like, I want to live in a state of hope. And to your point, when we look for those stories, the good news stories, the things that are happening around us, that is what brings me hope. That we are, you know, we are surrounded by good stuff. And even though it may feel like we're not often.
Indeed. And it's, you know, it's that word hope that comes up quite often in the feedback we get around Time for Kindness. Actually, that's what people, because people were saying to me, oh, I love Time for Kindness, love it. And so I started saying, oh, that's great. Why? What is it that you really like about it? And it's that people say they like it because it's authentic stories. So it's things that are actually happening rather than kind of inspiring quotes. I think there's a place for those, but that's not what we do.
I'm the quote queen, so
I'm not against it. What we're doing in the program, it's about going, look, it is there. You know, people have been inspired by those quotes, and we've got that stuff. And they say they like that it's authentic and it makes them feel hope. Because actually, if you watch the news, I mean, how easy is it to not feel hope and to see the awful things that people are doing to each other? But there is also lots of people who aren't doing those things. We just hear about those because it's more unusual to some extent, you know, in some cases that's why it gets more airtime. So you know, that hope is what comes through when you see, actually, the vast majority of people do help each other. They do kind of, if you saw a neighbour drop their shopping, you'd go and help them pick it up, or, you know, all sorts of different things. Yeah, and I believe most people would.
Yeah, they would.
We have this story that, oh no, they wouldn't. Well, not everyone would, but let's look for the ones who would, and let's focus on them. Because of them, we have that spiral that's going upwards, don't we? A virtuous circle that is much more about, yes, this is who we are as human beings. We are kind, we are hopeful, we are positive. Yes, we have bad days, we all have those. So it's not about toxic positivity, you know, pretending everything is all right. It isn't one or the other, but let's have a bit more of a balance in the stories we tell each other and we tell ourselves. And when I rule the world, that's what will happen.
Yeah. It'll be a brilliant world if you rule the world, Sarah. I can guarantee it. I can't believe we're almost approaching 30 minutes. How fast do these TV things go? So I want to ask, as I ask all my guests, and this is a little bit to get to know you as well. Who would you invite? So who are your 5 dinner guests that you would invite? Living or dead, you know, whoever. But who are those 5 people and why?
So I have had a little think about this because I thought you might ask me that one. I've seen you ask other people. So I think I would invite Mary Portis, who I think somebody else.
Oh, second time for Mary.
I love Mary Portis, and she has a podcast called Beautiful Misfits, which is all about people who want to do things in a different way and say, actually, I've always done it that way, I'm going to do it a different way. And she talks about a lot about kindness in business and bringing that in. So I think, you know, it would be great to have a conversation with that. And I think
I'm going to have to get her at one of my future Rebel events, Mary Portis, because she's mentioned a couple of times. So if Mary's watching, Mary, watch out for that email.
I am a big fan of football, and particularly women's football. I have a 16-year-old daughter who plays football, adores the Lionesses. So I think I would have to invite Leah Williamson, who is she captained the Lionesses to win the Euros last year. She's injured at the moment. I'm off to see them play tonight, and she won't be playing because she's still injured, bless her. But again, I think she's an incredible role model on and off the pitch. So it would be great to have her. I have 2 sisters who I adore, so I would bring them along as well. So that's 4, isn't it? It's just fun. You know, we all 3 of us have busy lives, so it's fun to kind of hang out. And then my final one, I think I would invite Victoria Wood. Obviously, she's no longer with us. Some years now. I absolutely adore Victoria Wood. And again, my sisters and are big fans. We grew up watching Victoria Wood. We
same.
All sorts of her sketches and lines to each other. So I think it would just be fantastic to have Victoria with us.
Love
to make us laugh and just have a normal, real life conversation, for want of a better way. I love Dinner Ladies because I think it is such an absolute. I've worked in accounting myself, and it is just so spot on for the kinds of conversations real people really have. I just think we had such an amazing year for that.
Love it. If we have anyone who's not aware of who Victoria Wood was or what the shows that she used to, sadly she passed away a few years ago, check her out. Honestly, even now that Dinner Ladies and the programs that she was part of were incredible and then bring joy. And that's what I love is that I saw online not so long ago about glimmers. You know, that glimmer, somebody shared it on Instagram, I think, and they were like, look out for those glimmers. It's not, you don't, like you said, toxic positivity is not helpful at all. But every day we can look out for those glimmers, right? Those moments of joy, that moments of hope, the moments of kindness, that just stabilizes the kind of negative stuff that we are surrounded with or are thrown with, because that media thrive on that. And what, like you said, sometimes it's because of the unusual aspect of it, or it's just those kind of stories sell generally. And I hate to say that, but they do. So we need to look for those glimmers out there, because we need that. We're not conditioned to be surrounded by continuous tragedy and bad news. And we all have privilege. People say we've got the privilege to switch that off. Yes, we do. But like I said right at the start of the conversation, that if we don't look after ourselves and make sure that our mental health is in a good place, then we're not going to be able to help anybody with anything. And that's number one priority.
Yeah, and you're not going to make anyone else happier by making yourself miserable. They will still be suffering, even if you're kind of using that guilt, as you say, not to do things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've recently heard about people who are either instead of or alongside the kind of gratitude thing at the end of the day, where you think of 3 things you've been grateful about, actually think of what's the kindness I've seen today. What's an example of kindness I've seen today? And you will have seen something, even if it's really, really small. If you intentionally think about it, there will have been something there. So I think that's quite a good habit to get yourself started, as it were, to notice.
I agree. I'm going to do that. I'm going to start doing that. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. If people want to follow you and connect with you, where are those places they can do that?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn as Sarah Browning, she, her. So please come and find me there. Time for Kindness, probably the best. We do have a LinkedIn page. We're also on Instagram, which is at time_for_kindness. We are also on Facebook, although I'll be honest, I don't give that page a great deal of love. So LinkedIn and Instagram is probably the best practice. Come and have a look at the stories and send me your stories as well, because I'm always in need of more. I'm not going to run out, but I do need a constant and stream, and they make me smile. I love hearing the stories as well. So come and be part of our kindness believing gang.
Thank you. And like I said at the start, Sarah is also one of my CommsRebel associates. So we work together on various things, and we'll be working more in the new year on certain things as well. So if you want to work with us together, then please just email hello@commsrebel.com as well. Next week, it's a solo episode. So you just get me, and I'm going to be answering questions. So I don't know what I'm getting myself in for here. I'm just going to say it out. I don't know what I'm getting myself in for, but I'm going to be answering questions that have been submitted through my community. So if you're a subscriber to my newsletter, and if you are not, then please do so, and make sure the link is shared in the comments. And Sarah, if you've got one, we'll share that link as well. So if you subscribe to my newsletter, we share top tips and inclusive culture stuff in there, but there's a link in there to fill in what question I can answer for you next week. So it'll be the last one for 2023, and then we're going to kick off again with Curious Rebel TV in 2024, but I'll tell you more about that next week. Thank you, Sarah, for your time, your energy, and this incredible conversation. I knew it would be a good one, and I definitely was not disappointed. And for those of you who are watching, we will see you next time.